Every single time you shop online, check your email, or even just land on a secure website, there's this invisible system working in the background, working overtime to keep you safe. It's called public key infrastructure, or PKI for short. And honestly, it's the absolute bedrock of trust on the internet. All right, let's pull back the curtain and see how this whole thing actually works. So this is the big question, right? How can you possibly send a private message to a friend or your credit card number to Amazon when the internet is basically a giant open highway? Anyone could be listening in. The answer, it turns out, is a really, really clever system of cryptography. The official name for all this magic is public key infrastructure. Now, I know that sounds super formal, maybe even a little boring, but the word to focus on here is infrastructure. This isn't just one piece of software. Nope. It's a whole ecosystem, policies, special hardware, procedures, all working together to manage our digital identities and lock down our conversations. To really get why PKI is such a game changer, we kind of have to look at what came before it. So let's start with the basics, with something called symmetric encryption. I just love this analogy. Picture this. You've got a secret in a suitcase. You lock it up, and then you handcuff that suitcase to a courier. Now, that secret is totally safe, but only as long as that one single key is also safe. This right here, this is the whole idea behind symmetric encryption. One key locks it, and the very same key unlocks it. So, to put it another way, with symmetric encryption, you and I have to share a secret. We both need a copy of the exact same key. You use it to lock the box, and I use my copy to unlock it. It's simple, it's fast, it works, but as we're about to see, it's got one giant glaring flaw. Okay, so this single key method is super fast, which is great. But it runs into a massive problem, and that problem is scale. Think about it. It's fine for just you and me, but what if you need to talk securely with 10 people, or 1,000, or 1,000,000? You'd have to create, share, and manage a unique secret key for every single one of them. It becomes a total logistical nightmare, and fast. And this brings us to the modern solution. It's so elegant, it almost feels like magic. It's called asymmetric encryption, and it just completely solves that whole scalability problem. And there it is. This is the other half of the story. Unlike the old way, this method uses two different keys. They're created together as a mathematical pair, but they do very different jobs. One key, your public key, is used to lock stuff up, to encrypt it. But the other key, your private key, is the only thing in the world that can unlock it. Now, for this whole thing to work, it has to follow some very strict rules. First, the keys are born together. They're a mathematical pair. But from there, they live very different lives. You guard your private key with your life. It is for your eyes only. Your public key, though, shout it from the rooftops. Post it online, email it to everybody, it doesn't matter. And that gets us to the most important rule. A message locked with your public key can only be opened by our private key. It's a one-way street. And the absolute secret sauce? The math is so clever that nobody, and I mean nobody, can figure out your private key just by looking at your public one. That's the genius of it. Okay, so that's all theory. How does this actually play out in the real world? Well, let's use the classic security example, a story about two people, we'll call them Alice and Bob, who need to share a secret. Okay. Let's walk through it. First, Alice generates her key pair. She keeps that private key totally secret, but she puts her public key out there for anyone to find. Now, Bob wants to send her a message. He writes, "Hello, Alice." To send it securely, he grabs Alice's public key and uses it to scramble his message into complete gibberish. Then he sends that scrambled message over the internet. When Alice gets it, she just uses her secret private key and poof, it turns right back into Bob's original "Hello, Alice" message. And that right there, that's the whole ballgame. A hacker could be listening in, they could steal the scrambled message, they could even have a copy of Alice's public key, and it's all completely useless. Without Alice's private key, that message is just a meaningless jumble of characters. That is the security guarantee. Okay, so we've been talking about individuals, Alice and Bob. But what happens when you scale this up to a big company, a government agency, Suddenly you've got thousands of employees, each with their own private key. How on earth does an organization keep track of all that? This is where the infrastructure part of PKI really earns its keep. For a lot of these big organizations, the answer is something called key escrow. And what that basically means is they make a backup copy of a person's private keys and stash it in a super secure central vault, either one they manage themselves or one run by a trusted partner. But wait, why would you do that? Why would a company want a copy of your most secret key? Well, just think about it from their shoes for a second. What if an employee encrypts years of critical company research and then quits? How do you get that data back? Or what if someone loses their laptop? Is all their encrypted work just gone forever? Key escrow is the company's safety net. It's their master key, the thing that makes sure they can always get back into their own data when they absolutely have to. It's all about business continuity. And this leads us to this really big, fascinating question at the very heart of digital security today. This whole system is amazing for protecting our individual secrets. But for a big organization, it creates this natural tension, right? A push and pull between an individual's privacy and the company's need for access and control. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. When your most important data is locked away, who do you really trust to hold the master key?